Hey guys, I'm Tyler from Grower Solution, and we've got an exciting video for you today. If you can't tell where we're at Living Traditions Homestead to install a new greenhouse for them. If you're the only 10 people in the world that don't know who they are, they've got a YouTube channel showing you how to do all the DIY stuff at your house. Today we're going to be installing a 20 by 60 high sidewall greenhouse. It's got all the works on it. We've got roll-up side, roll-up doors, ventilation, and everything. We're going to put together a step-by-step video that shows you every little detail and tip and trick that we can think of to help this process be easier for you. So I guess, Kevin, Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, my name is Kevin. This is my wife, Sarah. We're here in Southwest Missouri, and we do have a YouTube channel where we try to teach you guys about the day-to-day life on a small family farm or homestead. We try to teach you how to be more self-sufficient, how to grow your own food, and how to just get out of the rat race and live a simpler life. This is actually greenhouse number 3 that we're getting from Grower Solution, and we are so excited to have them here to help us with this project.
So in this project, we're going to be using a team of guys that we brought with us. And so we did that so we could move quickly. But just know that these houses can be put up with as few as one person. Kevin and Sarah actually put up their other 2 houses all by themselves. Right. We'll link to those videos here. Eric Zadek from Country Living Experience actually did this whole thing solo on a Quonset house, and we'll link his video down here as well. But just know that you can do this by yourself. This project's not too big to tackle. We're gonna try and show you guys how to do that. So how are you guys planning on using this greenhouse, are you thinking?
Well, this one, our plan is most likely to be using it with raised beds inside. What we're trying to do is use it to extend our growing seasons here and to be able to grow cold weather things over the winter. We don't plan on heating this, but here in southern Missouri, our winters are mild enough. There's a lot of stuff that we can grow all winter long. In our other 2 greenhouses, we have a lot growing with no heat at all.
Awesome. All right guys, let's get started with this process. We're gonna try and show you every little trick that we know. Now know that this is a high sidewall house, so it applies, the directions are identical for that. But if you have a Quonset or a Glacier series or anything like that, most of the steps are the same. We're gonna be putting out additional videos that are specific to each house, but you can use this one as a reference guide along the way. We're gonna be making YouTube markers in the list here too, so you can go along to each section as we hit it, so you can skip back to the spot that you're on currently. All of our greenhouses ship via motor freight. So you're gonna receive something like this. We're gonna have a skid that's gonna have all of your hardware components, all of your end wall pieces for your poly and everything. Then you're gonna receive several different bundles of steel tubing behind us, which is gonna be your greenhouse that you'll just unload by hand off the freight truck. So then our team is gonna send you 2 different emails. One that's gonna have your tracking pro number, and then one that is gonna have our damaged freight policy that basically just reviews with you how you need to handle a situation if the skid arrives and it's damaged, if you're missing pieces, anything like that. And then also you're gonna receive a phone call from our guys that's gonna walk you through the entire process. And if you have any questions at all, you can always call our team and we're happy to help you. So in your box of componentry here, you're gonna have a bunch of bags and all the hardware and things that are gonna come with it. So you're gonna have your wind strapping batten tape, your printed instruction set. All of your hardware is going to be coming in labeled bags like the V-Truss hardware here with the tension bands. Roll-up side hardware and roll-up door hardware if you added those onto your kits. We've got bags of just your miscellaneous hardware, which include things like your tech screws, the different nuts and bolts and whatnot. And then your 2-hole straps here. So just be sure as you're going through this just to check every single package and all the boxes, because there are a lot of pieces to these greenhouses and people sometimes get a little bit confused with that when they're going through it. So just make sure you open every box, and it's easy just to kind of lay it out and get yourself organized at the beginning of the project. So depending on the size of your greenhouse, you may receive, if it's a larger greenhouse, a separate long box like this that's going to contain the main poly. Otherwise, your film with your end wall poly and your main piece of poly will be in your hardware box. But just to know, for this project, since it's a larger house, we do have the big piece of film here that ships alongside at motor freight. So all of your tubing is going to come wrapped in bundles like this. So the best way to approach this is you're going to be setting out each of your bundles in kind of an organized fashion like this, separating it out. Our team is gonna send you in those emails we referenced, it's gonna give you the number of bundles you should be expecting to receive, along with a color code, which is like the way that we've wrapped it here. So this one would be the white one. As you're unloading, if you notice anything out of the ordinary, if it looks like it's damaged or squirrely in any way, you're gonna wanna notate that with your driver. You're gonna wanna go ahead and accept your freight and then give us a call immediately so we can walk you through that process. So now what we're getting ready to do is we're gonna start squaring the greenhouse. To do that, we need to install the 4 corner posts. And in doing that on a high sidewall house, you really have 3 options. You're gonna have the ground stake driver that we have here that we include in the kit. And you can use this just with a regular sledgehammer. Another option that you've got is a T-post driver if you have one of those. And the third option is one that we really like and we learned from Kevin and Sarah is the gas-powered or pneumatic post driver. It's really gonna save your back here and speed up the process if you have access to it. If not, the first 2 are perfectly fine. It's just gonna take a little more sweat equity here. So now let's talk a little bit about site prep. So you have a lot of different options when it comes to this. You can build it basically to the lay of the land, which means that if you have a pretty level ground like what we have here today, then you can lay the posts out and you're just gonna drive them to the lay of the land and level off of that. If you don't and you need to level an area, then you might have to excavate a little bit to get that perfectly level if you're wanting to build on that. If you're doing concrete or something like that, you're gonna be building to a level platform. A good example of that is what Mr. Danny and Miss Wanda did down at Deep South Homestead. We're gonna put a link right here so you can go check out their install. So now that we've got the decision on how we're gonna build, today's to the lay of the land, we've already gone ahead and installed our ground cover here. So you have a lot of options for how you can prep here. Ground cover is a great option. Kevin and Sarah are gonna be doing raised beds inside of this house. It's a great option for a weed barrier here. Other options are you could be putting gravel down, you could pour concrete in it, you could put mulch. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to that. A couple other notes that we want to mention here is as you're starting this process, if you plan on growing in the ground, let's not till before we get the greenhouse installed. That's going to make it really difficult, if not impossible, to get the ground stakes to stay in the ground the way that you want them to during the installation process. So let's talk a little bit about something that's very important, and you need to take some time to do this right when you're starting your project, and that's squaring your greenhouse. For today's project, we've got this real nice fence line that we're gonna be using to pull off of to get our measurements for our first 2 ground stakes. So we've gone ahead and done that, we've driven them in. If you're gonna be doing this installation in the middle of a field, I mean, you don't really have to worry about that part. Essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna find your first location for your first ground stake. We're installing a 20 by 60 like we said. So then we're gonna take our tape measure, we're gonna run 20 feet across the way to where we're gonna mark our second ground stake. From there, we're gonna run long tape measures going this way to get the length of the house. It's a 60-foot house to mark this location. After that, we have diagonal tapes. We're gonna be doing a little math here. So we're going back to high school algebra with Pythagoras' theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Don't worry, you don't have to do the math. We've already done it for you. So basically in all your instructions, you're just gonna go down the line, find what size house you have and find out what your diagonal needs to be. For a 20 by 60 today, we've done 63 feet 3 inches to get that diagonal to make sure that as we put in our 3rd and 4th posts, that they're actually square as we're doing this process. So no matter which method you choose to drive your ground stakes, you're gonna be doing this on every single pole, and that's making sure it's plumb as you're driving it in. So we just have 2 little bullet levels that are magnetic that we slap on either side of the pole, and you're just gonna have someone apply tension to it until you can get both of the bubbles in the middle of the line. Now, with this current install, we run into a little bit of problem that you might run into during yours as well, and that's we've hit a little bit of rock. And we can't get the ground stake driven the full 24 inches all the way into the ground. So we're about to break out the gas-powered driver, see if we can hit that depth. If you cannot hit that depth for some reason because you've hit a boulder on, let's say, more than 15% of your ground stakes that you're driving, then you're gonna have to use concrete to secure that ground stake. If it's fewer than that 15% of your ground stakes, well then you're fine because the structure is supporting it as a whole, and as long as you're able to get it in the ground most of the way, we're about 4 to 5 inches shy here, you're still gonna be fine. It's fully supported there. So, okay, now that we're gonna do that, let's go ahead and knock this thing out. Michael, you wanna come over and let's show them how to use the gas-powered driver here. All right, so now we have our 4 corner posts in, and the next step, with the magic of television, we've got our string done. So basically what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna run just a tight line, and this is gonna serve as a guide as we're going to install down the line the rest of our ground stakes. As you're setting up your string line, you wanna make sure that it is run to the outside of the pipe on all 4 corners, because that's gonna give you the proper alignment. So once we have it here, we're gonna put another one up higher, and then instead of having to worry about all 4 directions to make sure that our ground stakes are plumb, we're just gonna be going left to right instead of front and back also. Now that we have all 4 ground stakes in and the string in, the next step's gonna be that we have gone down, we've run a tape measure from the outside of this corner post all the way to the length of the greenhouse to the other ground stake. And then we're gonna come every 4 feet. Our houses are on 4-foot centers, and we're gonna make a mark so that we know where to go ahead and drive the next ground stakes. So we've done that with a can of spray paint, and then we're gonna follow back through with our butane torch to go ahead and burn a small hole and seal the ground cover fabric. So then we're ready to come back and drive our ground stakes in the next step. We just got all the ground stakes in, and as you can see, we've got them lined up perfect. So the next step in this whole process is we've got a line at 7.5 foot high because it's a high sidewall house. And then we're gonna take a Sawzall after we mark that mark with a Sharpie, trim them all level, all the way down, all the way around the house. Right now, we've made it to the point where we're ready to put the bows together. So we found a relatively flat spot here near the job site where we can do that. This is gonna make it easier just to make sure nothing's crooked as you're putting it together. We've undone all of our bundles and we've separated them into 2 different piles. This is a high sidewall house, so it has a dog leg on the end of the bow. So you're gonna have swedged ends on one end, and then we've got another pile over here that's got the saw cut ends. So it's basically the opposite sides of the bow. We're just getting them a neat pile so it's easy to manufacture here in just a moment. So then you're just gonna lay out both pieces just like this. We've got a bag of tech screws out of our hardware kit. And all you're gonna do is take the swedged end into the saw cut end, insert them in there. And then you're gonna take a tech screw and you wanna put this either on the side or near the bottom coming up, because you don't want it to rub the film once we get it installed here. So there we go. All you're gonna do is rinse and repeat this process for all the bows, and then once they're all assembled, we're gonna tote them over here to the ground stakes and start slipping them in there to get the bows assembled. One quick note that you need to know is as you're bringing your bows over to start putting into the ground stakes is you want to keep the swedged end, which is basically the crimped end right here, all on the same side. So once we get the bows set into the ground stakes, they sit in there evenly. One other quick note is that on the very first and the very last bow, you just want to be aware to make sure that where you place your tech screws, it's going to be facing the interior of the house or down. That way it's not going to be rubbing on the film on the top or on the end walls. Just something to be aware so you're not going to be poking holes through your plastic. The next step in this process is going to be installing the purlin pipe. So the purlin pipe is going to be the smaller diameter 1 3/8 straight pipe that you receive in your kit, in your bundles. So basically the purlin pipe is the center piece of pipe that runs down the peak of the greenhouse, and that's going to sturdy up the bows to give it a little bit of rigidity. For all houses that are 20 foot and smaller in width, you're only gonna get 1 run of purlin, so that's what we're gonna do in this one. So okay, now that we've got the purlin, we know we're working on it, we're gonna work on it right here on the side. So we're gonna go ahead and connect every single piece that we have and run it down the length of the greenhouse. We're gonna come to one end of the greenhouse, we're gonna flush it up to the ground stake so it butts up right to the end so we don't have to make a cut on this end. So after that, we're gonna install 2 tech screws in our first joint here of purlin. Now that we've got that done, we're gonna take a Sharpie marker and we're gonna go mark the center of every single ground stake on the purlin pipe. So you're gonna mark on the purlin, dead center of the ground stake. And once we get on a ladder here in a minute to start hanging the purlin down the center bows, we're gonna use this reference mark to know where they need to align so that the bows are flush with the ground stakes. To keep this process manageable, we're only gonna put a tech screw every other bow. So that's gonna give us a 20-foot long piece, which should be easy enough to get up on the ladder. Part of the hardware you're gonna use for this portion is gonna be a Purlin clamp or a cross connector as we call it. And basically the easiest way to do this is it's gonna come with the 2 joints here plus a nut and a bolt. While you're on the ground, you might as well go ahead and pre-thread these loosely and tighten them there. Then if you got somebody on the ladder, toss it on up to them, and then they're gonna snap that clamp over the center of the bow. So now the guys are working behind me to go ahead and get the purlin clamps in place on this first 20-foot section. So we're gonna get that raised up, threaded through the purlin clamps themselves, and then go ahead and loosely tighten those. Then on the first and the last bow, those are a little bit different. We're gonna use a 2-hole strap on that. The 2-hole strap is going to attach the purlin to the bow with 3 tech screws. You're gonna put one through either hole and then one straight to the middle of the purlin clamp itself. You might wanna go ahead and pre-drill the 2-hole strap so it's a little bit easier to get the tech screws in there because it's kind of difficult to get a tech screw in while you're up that high. So we've got all the cross connectors in place and we've got the final 2-hole strap on the end wall. So now John's gonna climb up the ladder and we're gonna sawzall the pipe off flush with the end wall there. Once that's done, we're gonna go back through and in each purlin clamp, we're gonna place a tech screw through that so it connects it so it doesn't slip around at all. While we're doing this, we're also gonna go through and tighten the nuts and bolts on the cross connectors to cinch them down to the bow. Now that we got all those tech screws in, we're gonna call it a day. We got them in the cross connectors and we're at a good stopping point, so that's gonna end day 1. So we got the ground stakes in, the bows assembled and put together, and the purlin run and in there in place. So we're ready to call it quits. We're gonna go get some rest. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Well, good morning. We're out here at day 2 back at Living Traditions on the greenhouse install. And right now we're gonna get working on the baseboard and the header board. So we're gonna show you how to make choices on that and what hardware you're gonna be using for this process and kind of some decisions you need to think about. So for all of our houses, we recommend using 2x6x16 pressure treated lumber. The reason for this is it's gonna make it so that you have fewer cuts as you're coming down the line lining up your baseboards. So for instance, on this greenhouse, we have flushed up the 2x6 at this end of the greenhouse, run it all the way down here, and you can see we've got a protrusion right here. So we're gonna make a mark to cut this board off flush. And as we come down the line, let me just show you this. We wanna set up our boards so that they meet at a joint on the ground stake because we're gonna attach in the middle of the greenhouse with 2-hole straps. We already have one attached here so you can see how that works. Basically, you're going to center the 2-hole strap on the 2x6, and then you're gonna run a tech screw through the center band of that to go ahead and attach it to your ground stake so it's easier to work with. After that, you're gonna use 2 wood screws to tap into the 2x6 itself. So that's how you're gonna do that all the way down on the interior ground stakes. The only difference is gonna come on the corners. So instead of using the 2-hole straps on the end posts, on all 4 corners here, we're gonna use our corner brackets. They're gonna attach with the board coming flush to the end. We're gonna put 2 wood screws right here on the toe side of the board. We're gonna put 2 tech screws through the pre-drilled holes here, and then another wood screw on the interior here to tie the board to the frame. So now that we've got our measurements, we're gonna start with our headboards first. You wanna do this because we're gonna use a measurement from the bottom of the headboard to the top of the baseboard to make sure we get a nice level look all the way down the lengths of the greenhouse. So just as we talked about, we're gonna use the wood screws for the wood to metal connections and the tech screws for the metal to metal connections all the way down. We're also gonna install the corner brackets on these just as we mentioned. So it's gonna be wood screws and tech screws through that. All right guys, as you can see, we've had a little bit of rain coming down out here in Missouri, but that's not gonna stop us. It's just changing the way we're filming this a little bit, so bear with us on that. So what we're doing here is we've gone ahead and gotten our 2x6 boards and we butted them up to the end to flush it up to get our measurements coming all the way down. As we've gotten those measurements, we make a mark so that the joints of the board will meet the center of the ground stakes where they come together. So when that 2-hole strap comes in there, you're able to hit both boards and put the center tech screw through the ground stake itself. Once we do that, we're gonna come all the way here to the end. We're gonna take this board and flip it up. we're gonna take a measurement from the bottom of the top 2x6 and the top of the bottom 2x6, and that measurement we're gonna use as we go down as our trueness. So that way, as it goes down all the way, since we're building to the lay of the land, that the boards aren't just gonna go in a wave. They're gonna go a nice straight line. That's gonna help us when we put our roll-up sides in, so we start rolling them up, they're gonna roll up nice and evenly and come down nice and evenly. Now that we have that measurement, we're gonna use that all the way down here. The next step is gonna be the same that we did for the top boards. It's the same process. So you're gonna be putting the corner bracket on the 2 end corners, and then all of the ground stakes all the way down are gonna be 2-hole straps that you're attaching with 2 wood screws and 1 Tex screw all the way down. All right, guys, let's go get out in the rain and get this work done. Now let's talk about our V-Truss assembly here so we can take them over to the bows to install them. When you get your V-Trusses, you're gonna have 4 different pieces here. Yours might be slightly different because this is a 20-foot house and all the V-Truss widths match the width of the house. So we're gonna have a 10'6" and 8'6" piece of pipe. And then we're gonna have 2 pieces that make up the V that have got the crimped and pre-drilled edges on both sides. So we need all 4 of these pieces along with a tension band and a bolt, and then our Tex screws. So one quick tip, you're gonna lay your 2 long pieces out on a flat surface. It's good to put your flat edge down so that as you're putting these together, they're gonna stay in place for you. Then we're gonna insert the swedged pipe into the other one and place 2 Tex screws into this. Now that we got our pipes combined, what we're gonna do is we're gonna run a tape measure on the entire part, and we're gonna measure to find the center of this newly combined pipe. Now that we've got our center mark, we're gonna go ahead and take our tension band along with our 2 5'3" pieces, and we're gonna put that on that center mark there. So it's easiest to use a sawhorse here. Then basically you're gonna slip the tension band, bend it open, slip it over the pipe here, and put it center on your mark. Then you're gonna go and line both of the 2 5'3" pieces through the center of the tension band. Then we're gonna slip that bolt through all 3 pieces and just loosely tighten this nut here. So now that we have this assembled, we can go ahead and take this over to the bows and get it ready to hoist up in the air and attach to them. Now that we've got our V-trusses assembled, let's talk about how we are gonna install this on the bow itself. So for this portion, you're gonna need 4 tension bands along with the nuts and bolts. And then what we're gonna do with those tension bands, we're gonna attach on each side the cross member piece to the base of the bow. Then we're gonna take a tension band to attach the V portion of the V-truss to the arc of the bow here and put the nuts and bolts on them. You're gonna wanna do this loosely at the beginning just to get it attached to the bow, because then what we've gotta do is we've got to level this cross member side to side. Once we've got that level mark, we're gonna take a measurement from the arc of the bow to the top of the ground stake. And that's gonna be our measurement that we're gonna use to have this cross member in the same way all the way down as we install these V-trusses. So on this one, it's gonna be 10.5 inches. Same thing on the V-trusses. Once we have that leveled out, we're gonna take the V and spread these out. Then we're gonna take a measurement from the center purlin to the edge of this V-truss on both sides. On this case right here, it's 47 inches from the center purlin to this tension band right here. Same thing, we're gonna use this measurement all the way down to have a uniform look through the greenhouse and to have the proper tension on it. This might be slightly different for your model because on all V-trusses and on the different style houses, this is a different variant. That's why we can't give you the exact measurement, and this is kind of more of an art than a science here. But the main thing you want to do is to make sure that your V-trusses are level on the cross member and they're not putting downward pressure or pulling up on this cross piece. If you can get this level, you've got them installed right. Once we get all these things installed, then we're gonna come back through and we're gonna put a Tex screw through each tension band into the bow itself to lock it in place so there'll be no movement whatsoever. We'll also come back through and lock down all the nuts and bolts. And that's it, rinse and repeat. So that wraps up for day 2. So just to summarize what we've done here today, we've got the headboards installed, the baseboards installed. We got all the V-trusses in all the way down. So we're gonna go home, rest up tonight. We'll be back in the morning and get this thing finished up for you guys. All right guys, so it is Saturday morning and day 3 of the install. We've got the guys out here, we're ready to rock and roll. We're gonna get started on these end walls, start putting the Wirelock base on, and then we're gonna get to the satisfying part of starting to put the film on the greenhouse. Let's get going. Now that we got the V-trusses finished up, it's time to talk about end walls. So we sell end wall kits that are custom built to fit your needs. Today, what we're gonna be doing is we're installing the end wall kit to fit an 8-foot roll-up door, a 36-inch storm door, and ventilation in there. So while this one may be different than the one that you're purchasing, know that we can custom fit an end wall kit for any house that you need. You can also DIY build a kit out of lumber yourself if you'd like to, but we really highly recommend that you purchase this all steel end wall kit here. So now let's go through the steps of how we install this.
Starting off the end walls, we're gonna go ahead and lay tape measures from side to side here to get the points that we're gonna be inserting the ground stakes for the uprights. So we've got uprights that are gonna be going in on either side of the 8-foot roll-up door, and then here in a minute, we're gonna be installing uprights for the 36-inch storm door. These install really similar to the larger ground stakes that run down the sidewalls. So you're just gonna make sure to get these in plumb and level. Mike now has test fitted the square tubing that's going to go over the top, and then marking at the top for where we're going to make the cut, because all of the square tubing that comes in is going to be longer than what's necessary. Now Josh is going to trim back the ground stake because they tend to mushroom a little bit as you're hammering them in. Then we're going to be test fitting to make sure everything fits as intended, that it's still plumb and level. Now it's time for the tension band. So the tension band is going to go on the outside of the bow and on the outside of the square tubing and just connected with a bolt and a nut, and we're going to cinch those down. Once they're in place and we're ensure that they're level, we're going to put a Tex screw to lock that into the bow. Also on this house, we have 36-inch storm doors. Bob and Josh are here measuring to put the ground stakes in to match the rough opening of the door that we've chosen. They're also taking into account that on top of the ground stake, we have to slide the square tubing over that, and we need to be able to make sure that that's going to fit. So after they get the ground stakes in, we're going to test fit the door to the square tubing, and once we ensure everything's fitting correctly, then we can lock down the tension bands to the bow, ensuring that these are not going to move. Now we've got the uprights in place, it's time to measure for our headers and the seals that are going to hold the ventilation equipment, the roll-up doors, and the storm doors on each end. Once we have the measurements, we're going to cut down the square tubing to size, use our L brackets and Tex screws to mount them to the uprights, and then we're going to bring them back over to the uprights, test fit to ensure everything's working properly. Once we have them level, we're going to go ahead and attach them with Tex screws. Next, it's time to measure and cut our 2x6 pressure treated boards to fit the gaps on the end walls between the uprights. We're going to use the same L brackets, Tex screws, and wood screws to attach to the uprights. So you're going to use the Tex screws for the metal to metal connections and wood screws for the wood to metal connections. Next, we're on to adding the Wirelock base to the end walls. The base is what's going to hold the film to the greenhouse structure itself. So we're going to take measurements to add it to the baseboards and then picture frame around the roll-up door. Michael's made reference marks to cut 45-degree angles on the 3 pieces going around the roll-up door to ensure that they join properly. Then when we go to attach them to the uprights, we're going to use Tex screws for the metal to metal connections. As you can see here, John's actually using a Tex screw to pre-drill the base to then use wood screws to attach the Wirelock base to the timbers.
As we mentioned earlier, all of our end wall kits are highly customizable. So the exact measurements and dimensions that we've set up here might not be applicable to the way you're doing yours. But let's talk about a few things that we're going to have in common across all the kits here. So for each of the kits, you're going to have an all steel end wall. The way that we're going to connect our uprights to our headers are going to be with our L brackets and Tex screws right here. It's a real simple setup. So as you can see, we framed this in for a 36-inch exhaust fan that we have going on the back side here. Another similarity that we're going to have is going to be for the uprights and the way that they connect to the bow themselves. So you're going to be sticking the tension band over the outside of the bow and the outside of the upright. They're going to be sticking a carriage bolt through that upright and the tension band and connecting the nut on it.
Now we're ready to add the Wirelock base down the links of the greenhouse on the headboard. So we're gonna go ahead and lay these pieces out down the side of the greenhouse, and then we're gonna use a drill bit to pre-drill holes to attach to the timbers. Since this is going to be a metal to wood connection, we're gonna use wood screws for this the entire length down the greenhouse. This is basically a rinse and repeat process all the way down the length of the greenhouse. The only difference you're going to run into is when you get to the end walls. So once you get to the end walls, you're going to butt the Wirelock up to the end, make a mark on the inside of the last bow, and then you're going to trim that last piece of Wirelock base down. This is to allow a gap for another piece of Wirelock to go up and over the last bow and butt up to it. We're going to repeat this same trimming process on all four corners to ensure that we leave a gap for the Wirelock base piece that's going to go up and over the bow.
So now we're ready to show you guys how to do the Wirelock base. And what we've done is John has already pre-drilled this Wirelock base with a Tech screw to make it a little easier once we get up the ladder to go ahead and tap this into the 2x6 board on the header. He's gonna go ahead and drive 3 wood screws into this Wirelock base, and then they're gonna start to fold it over the curvature of the bow and then tack it down with Tech screws. All right, so now that we've got that first piece bent over the bow, we're gonna go on this side and do the same thing, repeat the same process here. So once we get this one mounted, we're gonna take a measurement to see what that gap is, to cut another piece of Wirelock base to fill that gap so we have a continuous arc all the way over. Now this is gonna be different on each house. You might have where both pieces overlap each other, so instead of filling the gap, you're gonna be trimming this second piece instead.
Our last part with the Wirelock base is going to be to trim a piece that we can apply to all 4 corner ground stakes to fill the gap between the headboard and the baseboard. We're going to attach this with a Tech screw just as we've done previously.
All right, so now that we've got all the end walls done, the Wirelock base on, we're gonna put the wind braces on now. Basically, these are gonna come with houses that are of a length of 40 foot or longer, and that helps give rigidity to the frame since it's such a long structure. So what you're gonna do here is John has already backed out the Tech screw out of the top of our Wirelock base that runs up the side of our end ground stake here. He's then taken a tension band and put it through this gap, and that's gonna attach the wind brace to that. So what he's gonna do is he's gonna put that through there, we're gonna run a nut and a bolt through it and cinch that down.
So now that we've got this cinched down, we're gonna go ahead and take that same Tech screw and run it through the Wirelock base and through the tension band to really attach it to the ground stake.
So now that we've got that section in, we're gonna run this down at an angle. There's not a specific measurement that we're gonna put this to here. It's basically a visual appeasing angle that we're gonna have that we're gonna match all the way around. We found that for this greenhouse. We've made a marking and we've repeated that same process on every single wind brace install. So we're just repeating the same process here. Michael's just putting the tension band on, the nut and bolt, cinching it down. Once he completes that, we're gonna put a Tech screw through it right here just to lock it in place. And that's it. So you're just gonna repeat this process on all 4 corners. All right, guys, now that we've got all the hardware on, the wind braces on, all the end wall framing is done, it's time for the exciting part and the really satisfying part, and that's putting on the greenhouse film. So let's get after it on the end walls first.
To start, let's unroll our end wall film and make sure that we have the text facing out so you can read it from the outside of the greenhouse. Your first piece of wiggle wire is going to go into the top middle channel of the bow, and you're going to work from the middle out. Make sure you want to try and keep this taut as you're inserting the wiggle wire. The wiggle wire goes in with just a zigzag motion back and forth that zips the film into the channel and holds it against the base of the greenhouse. So once we have it zipped into the top bow, we're gonna pull it down and go ahead and zip into the baseboard Wirelock channels. And after we get all that done, as you can see here, the guys are going through and wiring around any of the add-ons like we have on this house, the roll-up door feature. Anytime you get to the end of a channel is when you're going to use a pair of wire snips to just go ahead and snip off the wire and tuck that into the base so it doesn't stick out and poke through the poly. And then we're going to repeat the same steps on the opposite end wall. We're just going to work from the middle out and the top down while keeping the film tight. Once we've got that installed, then we're going to come back through and trim the poly, leaving about 3 to 4 inches of excess. And now we're ready to get started on the main piece of poly. In order to make it easier to pull the large piece of film over the greenhouse bow, John has tied a bottle to both corners of the main piece of film and then to a piece of stick that's connected to a rope that'll give us something to pull the film over the bow from the opposite side of the greenhouse. Now this is the part of the installation where it's nice to have a group of people. It can be done with just a couple people, but the more the merrier. Now as you're pulling the main piece of poly, take time as you cross the peak not to hit any hardware like cross connectors or sharp edges. You definitely don't want to rip the main piece of poly. Remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. As you're pulling it, be aware to pull it evenly, both left and right and front and back. Now for this next part, we're going to start on one end wall and begin to wiggle wire the main film into the first bow. Once we get it wired into the first bow, then we're going to go to the opposite end of the greenhouse, pull taut on the film, and then wiggle wire the main film into the last bow of the greenhouse. Next, we're going to add wire lock down the length of the greenhouse into the channel that's run into the header board. We're going to continue this down the entire length of the greenhouse on both sides. Now that we have the main piece of poly attached to the greenhouse, it's time for us to trim off the excess. Now since we have roll-up sides on this particular greenhouse, we're going to leave a little extra film, more than we would otherwise. We're going to repeat this process on both sides, and then doing this, you're going to have a lot of excess poly. We recommend folding that up and saving them away for future projects around the farm. Once we get that done, we're going to move on to the end walls. We're going to trim the excess off here, leaving about a 4 to 6 inch flap overhang. Be very careful during this trimming, trying not to punch holes in the end wall film. Another thing I want to note is that if we weren't on location, we would have picked a day with nice weather and really low wind. But luckily, we were able to get this greenhouse film on right before the storm rolled in.
All right, guys, we're back out here this morning. We had a little bit of a rain delay yesterday after we got the poly pulled on. So we're coming out here to finish with the roll-up sides, the roll-up doors, the rest of the end wall kits, pulling shade cloth over it. We're gonna be done. So let's go ahead and get started with the roll-up sides right now. Our roll-up sides are just one of the optional add-ons that we have for our greenhouse kits. They're an affordable, easy way to get ventilation in all of your kits here. So when you purchase the kit, you're gonna get the straight pipe that's gonna run the length of the house, the wind strapping that's gonna hold that to the side of the house as we start rolling them up and down. We've got our clamps here that are gonna hold the film onto the pipe as it's rolling it up. And then we've got our other accessories here like the fender washers and the screws that are just the extra hardware you're gonna need. On each side, you're gonna have an assembled roll-up handle on both sides to crank this thing up and down as we go. So let's go ahead and show you how to get this thing assembled.
So first thing, we're gonna lay out all of our roll-up side pipe and connect them end to end, center this piece on the greenhouse, and then come back through and add 2 Tech screws per connecting joint. Once we get all these pieces together, we're gonna come and push them up next to the baseboard, and then the swedged end that's left, we're gonna cut that off so that the handle piece will insert into that here later. Next, we're gonna perform what's called cradling. Essentially, we're gonna take the excess film, rolling it towards the inside of the greenhouse while cradling the pipe, which should be resting on the top of the baseboard. Once the film is properly adjusted and the pipe is held in place, we're going to come back to the inside of the greenhouse and add metal snap clamps to hold the film in place, which will snap around the pipe. So the spacing for these metal pipe clamps are going to be every 4 feet, or an easy rule of thumb is just to install one at every ground stake. These can just be snapped on by hand, but if you're struggling installing the clamp onto the roll-up pipe, you can use a rubber mallet to gently tap them over the pipe. Now we're going to install the black strapping. This secures the roll-up side to the frame of the greenhouse. We're going to fold one side of the black strapping to create a reinforced area, then we'll puncture a wood screw and a fender washer through, and we're going to attach this to the headboard. We're going to add a strap at every ground stake down the length of the greenhouse. Then we will pull it taut, fold the bottom part of the strapping to create another reinforced area, and attach it again at the bottom of the baseboard with a wood screw and a fender washer. At this point, we're ready to attach the roll-up side handle to the pipe itself. This is attached with a 9/16 nut and a 9/16 bolt head. So we're gonna need 2 sockets to tighten this down. We're gonna slip the sleeve over the bolt and then through the handle and then hand tighten the nylon threads. Then we're gonna tighten them down with the sockets or a wrench if that's all you have. And now we're going to place the handle to the inside of the roll-up pipe, facing towards the inside of the greenhouse. Then we're going to attach this to the pipe with 2 Tech screws about 1 inch apart from each other. You're going to repeat this same step on all 4 corners of the roll-up pipe. One other thing to note is that when it's cold, we need to make sure that the sides are rolled down. The strapping and the weight of the pipe will create a seal to keep the cold out. If you're setting this up for winter use, you can add wiggle wire channel to the baseboard to attach the film for long-term use during cold periods.
One of the optional upgrades on our greenhouses are the roll-up doors. We offer them in both an 8-foot and a 10-foot wide selection here. And Kevin and Sarah opted for this because they're going to be doing raised beds inside. So instead of them having to haul all that dirt in and out by shovel and wheelbarrow, he's going to be able to drive his tractor with the front end loader straight in there and fill those things up. It's just going to be a way easier process. We can add these to any of our greenhouse packages, but they are just an optional upgrade.
To begin installing the roll-up door, first we're going to take the reinforced film and hold it evenly over the door opening. We're going to use wiggle wire to attach the film to the door header. Then we're going to come back through and trim off any excess film, leaving about 4 to 6 inches on the outside of the door frame all the way around. Now we're going to pull the film taut and wiggle wire the film down the uprights of the door frame. This is how you can leave the film during the winter, but we are only doing this during install to make the pipe installation part a little bit easier. Next, we're going to assemble the knuckle joint hardware for the roll-up handle. Once assembled, we're going to insert into the roll-up door pipe and pull over the blue protective sleeve, and then attach the knuckle joint to the pipe with 2 Tech screws. We will then attach the handle extension side with 2 Tech screws as well. Just like the roll-up side handle, we're going to slip the sleeve over the bolt and tighten down with the nylon nut with 2 socket wrenches. Then we're going to insert the handle into the extension pipe and attach that with 2 Tech screws. Now we are going to readjust the protective sleeve over the knuckle assembly and tighten it in place with zip ties. Now we're going to center the roll-up door pipe assembly on the opening itself. Then we're going to trim off any excess pipe. And then, similar to the roll-up sides, we're going to repeat the cradling and snap clamp process. Again, similar to the roll-up sides, we're going to use the black strapping that's folded to create a reinforced section, and we're going to attach that to the metal uprights using the Tech screws and fender washers. And then at the bottom, we're going to attach it to the baseboard with wood screws and fender washers. We're going to repeat the same process on the other side of the door, ensuring that the roll-up door pipe is placed above our wood screws and fender washers installed at the baseboard. One of the finishing touches on the greenhouse is adding wind strapping. Wind strapping makes certain that the main piece of poly doesn't flex due to wind by cinching down the film to the frame. Doing this helps extend the life of the film. On this house, we're installing 4 sections of wind strapping. Our general rule is to add strapping every 12 to 16 feet in the spaces in between the bows. We're simply going to throw the roll over the peak of the house, and then, similar to before, fold the strapping to create a reinforced section and attach it to the headboard with wood screws and fender washers. We'll then pull the strap taut on the opposite side of the house, trim it, and repeat the steps to attach it to the headboard.
So we've added a ventilation package onto Kevin and Sarah's house here. So let's go ahead and walk through some of the components we've added and kind of tell you what they do here. So this is the 42-inch power shutter that we have. So we have this set up on a 2-stage thermostat. So once it hits the desired temperature, this will actually open before the exhaust fan kicks on the other end to go ahead and release some of that hot air from within the greenhouse. So let's go on in and we'll look at the flow fans now. So the next part of our ventilation kit that we've added here are 12-inch variable speed flow fans. So we have 2 flow fans mounted on this side of the greenhouse that are both pointed east, and they're gonna be blowing this way. And then I have 2 other fans mounted on this side of the greenhouse that are both aimed back west. So the reason you'd want to have this is it's creating a circular motion with the air inside of the greenhouse. In the wintertime, when you're trying to heat it, it's really going to help keep that air moved around so we have an even temperature throughout the house. And then also in the spring and summer when it starts to heat up, it's really going to help evacuate that heat out of the house a lot quicker than if you didn't have them. So on this wall, we have our 36-inch slant wall galvanized steel exhaust fan. So this is going to be tied in sync with the 42-inch shutter on the opposite end of the house. They're both going to be wired into a 2-stage thermostat to really keep the temperature moderated inside of the house. So not only is it controlling the climate inside, it's also controlling the humidity inside. This is really going to play a big factor in making disease a non-issue as you start growing. So one other tool that we have to help control the climate inside of the greenhouse is our shade cloth. So we offer this in various different colors and various different percentages depending on what you're going to be growing. We're going to have the shade cloth that's going to best suit your needs. We also offer this for custom sizes. So if you would like to use something like this for like a pergola or a back deck, we can hook you up with that.
The shade cloth installation is very similar to the main piece of poly. We're going to tie a rope through the grommets and then attach a water bottle or something heavy to toss the rope to the other side of the greenhouse. Then we'll gently pull the shade cloth over the peak of the bow, centering it on the greenhouse, and then attaching it using wiggle wire on the first and the last bow, and then wiggle wiring it into the Wirelock channel running along the headboard.
So that does it for this greenhouse install here today. So let's summarize what all we've done. So this is going to be a 20 by 60 high sidewall greenhouse. We've installed both roll-up sides, roll-up doors, and a complete ventilation kit. The ventilation kit includes a 42-inch power shutter. We also have a 36-inch exhaust fan. We have 4 high-velocity flow fans. Then we also have a large piece of shade cloth to help keep the temperature cool on the inside. We've also added our V-Truss system in here to help sturdy this up for any extreme weather like strong winds or blizzards. So we're really excited to see what all Kevin and Sarah get growing in here. If you'd like to follow along with their journey, we're going to put a link to their channel below that's going to have all sorts of amazing gardening tips and homesteading lifestyle. We'd like to say a huge thank you to them for being such amazing hosts and letting us come out here to shoot this tutorial video. If you guys have any questions at all during your installation process, or if you're interested in purchasing your own greenhouse, please head on over to growersolution.com for more information.